Good day, grade 12 learners. Welcome to today's Business Studies revision lesson. My name is Shellington Banda, and this lesson is brought to you by the Northern Cape Department of Education in collaboration with Pagama Research and Development. Our topic for today is revision, and our subtopic is revision on business ventures. That's lesson number 3. Okay, grade 12s, let's move on and look at our revision lesson objectives. At the end of this revision lesson, you will be expected to be able to answer the Business Studies Paper 2, Section B, Question 3 questions, which are direct as well as indirect type questions focusing on business ventures. And under business ventures, these are the issues that we will be looking at from the questions that we will be practicing with. Its management and leadership, investment, securities and opportunities, investment, that's insurance, team performance assessment, as well as conflict management. Our source for these revision questions that we are going to be working through is the Gauteng Department of Education Business Studies Paper 2, and the page references, that's page 7. This is the June 2024 paper that we are going to be using. And also, we have the DBE 2021 exam guidelines, pages 10 to 16. All right, grade 12s. Before we delve into our revision questions, I want us to look at some tips. I want to share with you some exam tips which will come handy for you when you sit for your paper. All right. Firstly, I would like to say to you, you need to make sure you read all the instructions carefully before answering the questions, right? The time you are going to receive your exam question paper, you don't rush into answering the questions. You make sure you read all the instructions and read them carefully. Your Business Studies Paper 2, Grade 12s, the second section, which is Section B, consists of 3 questions, right? You will remember that for your Section A, you have only question 1, which is compulsory. But when it comes to Section B, you are going to have question number 2, question number 3, and question number 4. So that's why we are saying your paper 2, section B consists of 3 questions. You are expected to answer any 2 of those 3 questions in this section B. So if you settle for question 2, you are going to take that as one of the 2 questions you are answering. So it will be question 2, probably question 3. So you take question 2 and 3. Or it could be question 2 and 4, or it could be question 3 and 4. So whichever 2 questions you feel you are comfortable with, those are the ones that you will take. All right. You need to read each question carefully, taking note of what is required. This cannot be overemphasized. You need to understand what's required of you in each of the questions that you select before answering those questions. So I always advise you learners to make sure that you read all the 3 questions. Go through question 2 from beginning to end. Go to question 3, do the same thing from beginning to end. And question 4, you do the same thing, all right? After you have read all the 3 questions, you are better placed to decide which two you want to pick. Then section B, grade 12, has questions that are direct or indirect. These are direct or indirect type questions. All right. So each one of them carries 40 marks. So this is to say, for your question 2, for instance, right, you've got 40 marks. Question 3, 40 marks. And then question 4, this is question 3. Then question 4, also 40 marks. But remember, we said you pick only 2 questions. That's to say, for section B, you've got a total of 80 marks. All right. I want you to also take note of the time usage. Very, very important. You don't want to waste a lot of time on only one question, only to find that you have no time remaining for the other question. So for your section B, these 2 questions, all right, we suggest that you spend 70 minutes for both of them. That's to say, for question 2, should you pick question 2, you have 35 minutes to answer that question. And then the other 35 minutes for the second choice. All right. So those are the tips that I want you to remember when you get into your exam room. All right. Now let's move on grade 12 to our questions. All right. So here it says, clearly indicate the question number of each question that you choose. The answer to each question must start on a new page. For example, question 2 on a new page. Question 3 on a new page. It may so happen, grade 12, that you've got, let's say you've got your question 3, it has got part questions under it, right? Starting from question 3.1 up to probably 3.7 or 3.8, as the case may be. So what you need to do is you write answering that question up to the end. Now, when you are moving on to the next question that you will have selected, let's say you have chosen question 4, you don't have to start question 4 on the same page where you ended question 3, for instance. You now need to move on to a new page, a fresh page. That's an instruction you need to follow. Okay, so let's look at our questions here. We've got question 3.1, which says, give any 4 examples of ethical behavior in the workplace, right? Then 3.2, identify the types of unprofessional business practices displayed by the employees of Galaxy Trading in each statement below. The first statement, 3.2.1, reads, employees make personal calls during working hours. That's for 2 marks. Then 3.2.2, employees download movies using the resources of the business. All right, before I allow you to work through these questions, I want to draw your attention to the word give in 3.1, as well as the word identify in 3.2. These are command words that are used for the questions, right? It is very important, grade 12. It is very paramount for you to understand the command word used per question, because your understanding of that word used to ask the question will determine whether you will answer your question satisfactorily. So if you are asked to give, right, You are simply providing. You are simply pointing out. Right. So almost similar to the second one, where you are identifying. You are pointing out a specific idea or a specific point. All right. So for your 3.1, I also need to emphasize, all right, this number here, 4, this word 4, as you can see, it is highlighted by using a capital letter. So you take note of this. Please make sure you observe, right? So you are required to give any 4. Should you give 2, you have fallen short. Should you give 3, you have not satisfied the requirement of the question. All right, so the demand here is for you to come up with 4 examples of ethical behavior in the workplace. As you can see, that question carries a maximum of 4 marks. Also, I need to underline this to say there is no need for you to provide more than 4 because you will only be credited for 4 examples that you provide. Yes, you may know probably 10 of such examples. There is no need really because you will simply be wasting your time that you could wisely use to answer subsequent questions. All right, so you are going to have 6 minutes for you to be able to work through 3.1 and 3.2 and its part question. Okay, grade 12s. Thank you. Let's see how you did with the first one, where you were expected to give any 4 examples of ethical behavior in the workplace. You see, it says any 4. So there isn't a specific type of 4 examples here. Any example that qualifies as ethical behavior will be acceptable. All right. Now, before we even look at what you came up with, you need to have understood this word, this term, ethical, right? Behavior. You needed to understand that phrase, ethical behavior. What is ethical behavior? Ethical behavior refers to acceptable. All right, I'm going to write here and say acceptable actions that do not violate violate right workplace norms. Workplace norms. So these are actions that are acceptable. These are behaviors, right, that are acceptable in the workplace, for instance. Okay, they do not violate the norms of that workplace. So if your actions, if your behavior does not or do not violate the norms at your workplace, then we refer to those as being ethical behaviors or ethical actions. All right. So you need here to provide 4 examples. All right. So let's see how you did with your 4 examples. Right. The first one, for example, you may have wanted to refer to the issue of advertising. All right. So using fair advertising is an ethical behavior. Right. The opposite is true. Okay. So unfair advertising is unethical. Then also not using child labor. Remember, it is an unethical behavior. That is something that could actually be regarded as a criminal offense to engage child labor in the workplace. All right. Treating all employees equally. That's ethical. That's an ethical behavior when employees in the workplace are treated equally. All right. So you've got your act that regulates how employees are treated in the workplace. You may want to remind yourself of the Employment Equity Act, or you may also want to remind yourself of the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. All right, so employees in the workplace are to be treated equally and fairly. So when that happens, that's an example of ethical behavior. Also, paying fair wages as an employer, all right? You are paying your employees commensurate with the work that they do. That's ethical behavior. Also, operating within the ambit of law, operating within the law. That's ethical behavior. Also, business deals are conducted openly, right? When business deals are not done clandestinely, but openly with all transparency, that is regarded as being ethical. Also, not engaging in illegal business practices, all right? So every practice that the business gets itself involved in is done within the parameters of law or legislation. So that makes that business become an ethical business rather. Okay, also ensuring that the environment is not polluted, for instance. That's an ethical behavior. Okay, so we also have more examples here that you could have come up with grade 12s, but remember 4 would suffice, right? Another example would be adopting codes of good ethical practice. Then establishing cooperative social responsibility initiatives where the business or the organization gets involved in the upliftment of the community within which they operate. Also, encouraging employees to adopt ethical behavior. That's an example of ethical behavior. If the business encourages its employees to adopt ethical behavior, this is not a business that encourages its employees to get themselves involved in unethical actions. Right. Also, clients and employees' information is not disclosed or used for the benefit of the business. Remember, there is regulation around how a business can use the information of their employees or their clients. Should a business be found not complying, they can actually have criminal charges laid against them. Okay. Shareholders and employees' personal interests and business interests do not conflict with one another. That's another example of ethical behavior in a workplace. All right. We still have more, quite a lot of them. All right. I'm simply reading this out so that you can see that you cannot really run short of providing 4 examples out of a plethora of these examples, a whole list of these examples. The business tells the truth, right? During a public relations crisis. Should there be a public relations crisis? Or should there be something that happens? Let's say maybe a fire breaks out in a workplace, right? Nothing gets hidden. This business comes out smart and they tell the truth as to what led to that fire breaking out. All right, so they tell the truth during a public relations crisis to overcome the issue they are facing. All right, businesses keep promises to their employees, partners, and customers. So when a business is able to keep to its promises made to the employees or to customers or to partners. That's an ethical business. That's an ethical behavior or action being exhibited by the business. Also, the business shows loyalty when they make decisions that will also benefit their staff, partners, investors, and customers. All right. And the business shows fairness when it exercises its power justly to all its stakeholders. So these are examples of ethical behavior. All right. So out of that whole list, grade 12, you definitely will not be able to list 4 and get yourself 4 full marks. All right. Let's now look at question 3.2, which required you to identify the types of unprofessional business practices displayed by the employees of Galaxy Trading in each statement below. So here you will be given a statement, and from that statement you are expected to identify, to point out what is the unprofessional business practice. All right, so let's look at the first statement. The first statement says employees make personal calls during working hours, right? They are making personal calls. Now remember, this is actually an unethical practice on the part of employees, right? They are making personal calls during working hours. And you might find that they are not using their own phones, but they are actually using company phone, right? So let's look at the unprofessional business practice here, all right? When employees make personal calls during working hours. So you would here point out the fact that unauthorized use of workplace funds as well as resources. Remember, I said they are using the company's phone, and that means a cost on the part of the company or on the part of the business. And those calls, we are told, are personal. And that's to say they are not sanctioned. Those are unauthorized calls. All right. So they are making unauthorized calls, or they are engaging themselves in unauthorized use of workplace funds as well as resources. So for that, you get yourself 2 marks. All right, let's look at 3.2.2. It says employees download movies using the resources of the business, right? So instead of these employees using what is committed to them for the execution of their duties or tasks, they decide to download movies using the resources of the business. So what is expected of you here? All right, let's see how you did. All right, so here there is an element of abuse of work time. Right, remember they say time is money. All right, so when employees spend company time downloading movies, right, they are misusing the resources of the business. They are abusing also the time that they could be using effectively to achieve the tasks that they have. All right, so we move on grade 12s. Okay, I hope you did very well there. We move on now to question 3.3, which is a scenario type of response. So this is a presentation and data response type of question you have. It says read the scenario. So you first read the given scenario, and then answer the questions that follow, right? This is the scenario we have here. Farm to Table Limited, that's FTL. Peter was appointed as a new CEO at Farm to Table Limited. He had to make some changes, right? Had to make some changes to the business and had to make some important decisions, right? Some shareholders were not aware of these changes and decisions. Let me read that again. Peter was appointed as a new CEO, Chief Executive Officer at Farm to Table Limited. He had to make some changes to the business and had to make some important decisions. Some shareholders were not aware of these changes and decisions. And the questions that emanate from this scenario, the first one says, that's 3.3.1, identify the King Code principle. Identify. So you need to say what King Code principle applied, all right, or was applied by FTL in this instance. Then 3.3.2, explain other ways in which FTL can apply the King Code principle identified in question 3.3.1. Now, before you start answering those questions, I want to remind you of this command word explain. When you are asked to explain, right? So you are supposed to provide detailed information on a particular topic or on a particular concept. And in this case, you are explaining on other different ways in which this company FTL could apply, right, the King Code principle in their business. All right. And I want you to take note of the fact that this is a follow-through or a follow-up question, right, from 3.3.1. So that's to say the answer you provided in 3.3.1 should form the basis upon which you lay the answer you are providing now in question 3.3.2. You are not going to speak to something different from what you provided in question 3.3.1. All right, so I'm going to give you 5 minutes for you to be able to go through these questions. Thank you, grade 12s. All right, let's see how you did. Okay, with 3.3.1, which says identify the King Code principle. Now, before we even talk about the answer that you came up with, right, I want to remind you of what you probably did already in class. I know you were taken through this by your teachers in class, the King Code principles. All right. So what is the King Code? All right. We needed to have an understanding of what this refers to. The King Code is a set of corporate governance principles, right? A set of corporate governance principles for South Africa, right? We've got the King Code principle here in South Africa. So this set of corporate governance principles, all right, emphasizes certain principles. Right. So it emphasizes, I'm going to put here what it emphasizes. It emphasizes ethical leadership. Ethical leadership. We've already spoken so much about ethical behavior, right? So this set of corporate governance principles called the King Code, right, speaks to or emphasizes ethical leadership. It also promotes transparency in decision-making processes within an organization, right? So it speaks of transparency. All right. So nothing should be hidden. Okay. Let's say from the employees, right? They should be made privy of, let's say, the policies within the business or the organization. Okay. And also, I need to underline here to say that the adoption of the King Code principle, if a company adopts this King Code principle, that company is said to be a company that has good governance. All right. So companies which are regarded as embracing the values of good governance actually adopt the King Code principles, the principles of transparency, the principles of ethical leadership. All right. So let's see grade 12's, what you yourselves came up with there. All right. There is transparency. Okay. So why transparency? Let's look at our scenario. It says Peter was appointed as a new CEO at Farm to Table Limited. He had to make some changes to their business and had to make some important decisions. Some shareholders were not aware of these changes and decisions. Okay, I think here there is a discrepancy, all right? So it has to be all shareholders were actually made aware of these changes and decisions. All right, so just bear with the typo that came in here into this scenario. All right, so all the shareholders, all right, are supposed to be made privy of the changes and decisions that are being taken. And when that happens, we would then say that the King Code principle applied by this business is that of transparency. All right. But if the shareholders are not aware of these changes and decisions, you would then say that the business violated the principle of transparency. The business did not apply the King Code principle they were supposed to apply. Okay, let's move on grade 12, all right, to the second question 3.3.2, where you are expected to explain other ways in which this business FTL could apply the King Code principle identified in question 3.3.1. Remember, we identified the principle of transparency. All right. Things done openly. All right. So, what are the other ways in which this business can apply transparency in their operations? Let's look at the responses you needed to come up with. 1. Staffing and other processes should be open and transparent. All right. For instance, if there are positions to be filled within the organization or within the business, those positions should be declared, right? So that everyone knows there is a position that has arisen, right? Also, provide the existing employees with the opportunity of applying for any of such positions should they want to. Okay. Then next, you could have pointed out that employees or shareholders or directors should be aware of the employment policies of the business. Right, they should be aware of the employment policies of the business. So every stakeholder needs to have a knowledge and awareness of the employment policies of the business. Also, auditing and other reports must be accurate, or they must be made available to shareholders as well as the employees. All right. So nothing should be done under the carpet or swept under the carpet, rather. All right. Nothing must be done without the knowledge of the stakeholders. Then regular audits should be done to determine the effectiveness of the business. Right. These are different ways in which FTL can apply the King Code principle of transparency in their dealings. Right. Also, business deals should be conducted openly. Right. Openly, so that there is no hint or sign of dishonesty. So dishonesty is actually against the King Code principle. Right. So there shouldn't be any sign of corruption. Some of you know that some businesses have actually ended up folding up because of issues of corruption. All right. Also, you could have mentioned to say that business deals should be, okay, we've seen that one, where business deals should be conducted openly. All right. Businesses should give details of shareholders' voting rights to them before or at the annual general meeting. Right. Shareholders should know that they have voting rights. That should not be kept away from them. The board of directors must report on both the negative and positive impact of the business on the community or the environment. So if it so happens that the business's operations are affecting the environment, right, the board of directors has a duty, they have a responsibility of reporting that to their stakeholders. All right, so these are ways in which FTL can apply the King Code principle of transparency. And the board should ensure that the company's ethics are effectively implemented. All right, so those are some of the ways in which FTL could apply the King Code principle of transparency. Now let's look at questions 3.4 up to 3.8. All right, I'm going to read out each one of those questions, and then afterwards I will allow you to work through the questions. All right. 3.4 says describe ways in which businesses could deal with sexual harassment as a type of unprofessional business practice. 3.5 says define creative thinking. 3.6 says explain the advantages of creative thinking in the workplace. 3.7 says discuss the following problem-solving steps. 3.7.1, identify the problem. 3.7.2, develop an action plan. 3.8, evaluate the positive impact of force field analysis as a problem-solving technique. But before you start answering grade 12s, I want to still emphasize on these command words for your questions. For 3.4, you are asked to describe, right? Provide detailed information as far as a certain concept is concerned. And in this case, you are providing detailed information as to what businesses could do in handling issues of sexual harassment as a type of unprofessional business practice. Unprofessional. So this goes against the norms of what is accepted in the workplace. So you want to look at this concept of sexual harassment, provide a detailed description, providing detailed information as to what ways businesses could adopt, right? Ways businesses could adopt to deal with this problem of sexual harassment as a type of unprofessional business practice. All right, so take note of this sexual harassment, right? Take note of this. You need to speak to that. You need to understand what sexual harassment amounts to. What is sexual harassment? Then 3.5, define creative thinking. So you've got here this command word, define, right? When you are defining, you are providing the meaning, right? It could be the meaning of a term, right? So you've got here this terminology, or you've got here this key phrase, creative thinking. So you want to explain, you want to give the meaning of what that is. Then 3.6, where you are explaining the advantages of creative thinking in the workplace. Now you will remember that when you're explaining, you are actually doing an analysis, all right? You've got a concept which you want to analyze, okay? So here you want to consider the advantages, because the question specifically says you will be explaining what advantages are tied to creative thinking in the workplace, right? What are the benefits of creative thinking in the workplace? Then 3.7, you've got this command word, discuss, right? You will remember in our previous revision lessons where I said when you are asked to discuss, you need to focus not only on one side of an argument, right? But rather you are looking at different perspectives. So if it is the advantages, you are looking at from the right-hand side. On the left-hand side, you are looking at the disadvantages. You're looking at the pros and cons. You're looking at the positives and negatives, okay? So in this case, for instance, if you are asked to identify, if you are to identify the problem, what are the advantages, right, of being able to identify the problem? Then it says develop an action plan. So this simply means expand, right after identifying the problem, expand and come up with. That is what this term develop is speaking into. And lastly, evaluate the positive impact of force field analysis. You need to remember what we said in class, or what was said by your teachers in class, right, about force field analysis. I'll speak into this when you have responded to the questions. So you are evaluating, you want to look at the impact, right, of this concept, force field analysis, as a problem solving technique. So if there is a problem that needs to be solved, right, this force field analysis could be used as a tool, right, in solving the problem at hand. Now you want to look at how effective this force field analysis is as a tool of solving problems. So I'm going to give you 10 minutes for you to be able to work through these questions. Now, before you work through them, take note of the maximum number of marks provided in each of those questions. So that becomes your guideline as to how long your question your answer needs to be. So at least 6 points should be provided in question 3.4, at least 4 points in 3.5, at least 6 points in 3.6. All right, so you take note of that, grade 12. It's very, very paramount. So please work through this, and I am going to take you through what could have been the possible responses. As you do so, I am going to give you a short break. You are working through that break, of course. Okay, grade 12s. Thank you. Let's see how you did. All right. For your question 3.4, where you were to describe ways in which businesses could deal with sexual harassment as a type of unprofessional business practice. Remember, should somebody get involved in sexual harassment in the workplace, that already falls under unprofessional business practice. All right. So, what ways can businesses deal with that problem? All right. These are some of the points that you could have come up with, right? Over and above the ones that you provided. Ensure that all employees are familiar with the code of ethics of sexual abuse. This is the responsibility of the company. This is the responsibility of the organization to make sure that all employees, all of them, right, are familiar with the code of ethics as far as sexual abuse is concerned. Secondly, you could have mentioned the point to say, create a good working environment where all employees' rights and dignity are respected, right? So this is very, very important. A good working environment where all employees, whether male or female, for instance, they have their rights upheld, right? They have their dignity respected. No one should have their dignity degraded or trashed in the workplace. All right. Internal investigation should be done in order to determine the seriousness of the harassment. Should sexual harassment occur in a work environment or in a company, there should be internal investigation. Things should not be let to go uninvestigated, all right? If there is, let's say, maybe a claim by an employee to say they've been sexually harassed, right? So that has to be taken seriously, and an internal investigation has to be launched. All right. Serious cases or matters on sexual harassment should be reported to the appropriate institutions, such as the South African Police Services. Okay. And then we also have other points, such as provide a framework for corrective action, right? Should there be a need for that? All right. So there should be a framework for corrective action, right? But this will only apply to those cases that are not serious. Otherwise, sexual harassment is to simply be reported to the South African Police Service when an internal investigation has been conducted. All right. Educate employees on sexual harassment matters. All right. That is very, very key. Formulate a policy regarding sexual harassment. So these are ways, remember, in which businesses could deal with this problem of sexual harassment as an unprofessional business practice. Implement internal complaints and disciplinary procedures. People should not be stifled should they have complaints against, let's say, maybe their fellow employees who may have harassed them. Okay. Ensure compliance with the law or the business code of conduct. All right. So that's very, very important. Out of that whole list, grade 12s, you need to come up with 6, and you will earn yourself the maximum number of marks. Okay, 3.5, define creative thinking. Right, creative thinking. You are defining, you are offering here you are providing the meaning of this term. Right, creative thinking. What is creative thinking? Let's see how you did. All right, so this is what you could have come up with, where you could say creative thinking is the ability to think of original and innovative ideas, right? You are able to generate innovative ideas. You are able to come up with novel or innovative solutions to problems, or you are able to come up with new ideas about products, right, which a business can produce, right? Secondly, you could add to your definition to say creative thinking focuses on exploring ideas or generating possibilities and looking for many different answers, right? Successful businesses always encourage employees to come up with new ideas, right? I want you to take note of these successful businesses. All right, so businesses that usually become very successful are those businesses that encourage their employees or members of the teams within the business to be creative, all right, to be innovative. They are encouraged to come up with new ideas and new ways of doing things in the workplace, all right? Their ideas are not cast in stone, all right? They always encourage their employees to always come up with new ideas, all right? So those are some of the points that you could have provided there. Question 3.6 says explain the advantages of creative thinking in the workplace, right? What are the benefits of creative thinking in the workplace? What does the company or the business stand to benefit should it have amongst the employees, those who are very creative, all right? Those who are given to creative thinking. All right, want to look at that. All right, these are the points that you could have come up with. I know some of you came up with these. All right, better or unique or unconventional ideas or solutions are generated. Right, here is a problem. In the place where there are creative thinkers, that problem will not go unsolved, right? So there will be solutions that are generated. And because solutions are generated, the business is taken forward, all right? Also, you could come up with this point or mention this point to say, may give the business a competitive advantage if unusual or unique solutions or ideas or strategies are implemented. So businesses that have got creative thinkers have a competitive advantage over other businesses that may be dealing in the same product or service as theirs. All right. Complex business problems may be solved, all right, in the context where there are creative thinkers. There are no complex problems that will be left unsolved, because here is a team of individuals who have got a way of coming up with solutions, even to complex business problems. Productivity increases as management or employees may quickly generate multiple ideas, which utilizes time and money more effectively. All right. Then also managers or employees have more confidence as they can live up to their full potential. There is nothing as motivating as you knowing that as an employee of an organization, you have that room where you can actually exercise your creative thinking ability. And as you get to be aware of that, you want to always come up with innovative ways of doing certain things that will take your organization forward. All right. We now look at more of, let's look at more of these advantages. Managers will be better leaders as they will be able to handle or manage changes positively and creatively. Then managers or employees can develop a completely new outlook, which may be applied to any task they may do. All right. Then it leads to more positive attitudes as managers as well as employees feel that they have contributed towards problem solving. So if there is a problem in a business and eventually a solution is arrived at, and the employees know they contributed to that solution, that actually motivates them. Should a problem arise in future, they are ready to say, oh, okay, we did it the other time. We can still do it this time around. All right. It improves motivation among staff members. That cannot be overemphasized. Managers or employees have a feeling of great accomplishment, and they will not resist or obstruct the process once they have personally solved a problem or contributed towards the success of the business. So there is a buy-in on the part of employees, on the part of everyone involved in coming up with the solution. All right, let's now move on. Right, I will simply scroll through these other responses. Right, it stimulates initiative from employees or managers as they continuously push out of their comfort zone. Creativity may lead to new inventions, which improves the general standard of living or attract new investors. Businesses can continuously improve on product development by exploring new ways to enhance growth. So you needed to just have 6 out of that whole list. All right. Then question 3.7 says, discuss the following problem solving steps. All right. So we've got here problem solving steps, and you need to discuss them. All right. 3.7.1 says the first step, which is to identify the problem. All right. You are expected to discuss this. You are expected to offer an explanation on this. All right. These are some of the things that you could have come up with here. All right. Firstly, you would say identifying the problem, right, speaks to acknowledging, right, that there is a problem. Then, after acknowledging that there is a problem, that's when you are able to map out the plan of how you will go about trying to solve that problem, how you are going to try and deal with that issue at hand. So, one, acknowledge that there is a problem. So, if you state this, All right, when you are explaining what identifying the problem is, you will be credited the grade 12s. Right. Secondly, you would then also say you identify the exact problem, or you could say here point out, all right, the exact or the particular problem. Because if you fail to point out the particular problem, you might find yourself dealing with something else other than the problem that needs to be solved. So acknowledge that there is a problem, identify that exact problem. That's the first step towards being able to deal with the problem. Then when you have done that, you break down the problem into smaller parts, okay, that are easier to solve separately. Then get information and suggestions from everyone. You want everyone to be involved. You don't want just a few people to work around solving a problem, but you want everyone to come on deck and be part of the solution, right? Who may be affected in order to identify the exact problem. Okay, so that is very, very important, grade 12s. So acknowledge that there is a problem, identify that exact problem, break it down into smaller parts that are easier to solve separately, get information and suggestions from everyone who may be affected in order to identify that exact problem. So that's what this speaks to, identifying the problem. Then 3.7.2, develop an action plan. Speak to that, all right? Discuss that. Tell us more, give us more information about what goes into developing an action plan, all right? Firstly, you need to arrange the necessary resources and delegate tasks. What resources do you need for you to be able to kickstart the process of dealing with the problem at hand? All right. And then you start delegating tasks. Remember, we said earlier, you want to break down the problem into smaller parts. Having done that, you want to assign those tasks to different individuals to say, so and so, this is what you need to work on. So and so, this is your task as we work and move towards solving the problem. Okay, then you establish a timeline for implementation. You don't leave things open-ended. You want to have timelines for implementation. Otherwise, you may find that you have lost a lot of time before the solution is brought to the table, and you need to set deadlines. Very important. Okay, so when you are developing an action plan, those are some of the things that go into that process. Now, the last question that we have here is 3.8, which says evaluate the positive impact of force field analysis as a problem-solving technique. All right. I said to you earlier, you need to have reminded yourself of the force field analysis as a tool that is engaged, all right, when solving problems. Okay, so you need to look at what positive impact this tool, the force field analysis, has when it comes to problem solving. Okay, remember force field analysis, this is a decision, I'll write it here, a decision making tool. Right? This is a decision making tool that is used to identify and evaluate forces, right? Forces that support or oppose a particular change. All right. So this is what force field analysis is all about. This is a decision-making tool that businesses use to identify and evaluate the forces that support a particular change or forces that oppose a particular change. So remember that grade 12s. Now you need to evaluate the positive impact of this type of analysis. Here are the points that you could have come up with. All right. Employees feel included and understood. All right. So where force field analysis is engaged, every employee becomes part of the problem solving process. And because of that, employees will feel included and understood. And when that happens, there is also motivation on the part of the employees. All right. Employees develop and grow with the business. All right. You want to always be a part of a business where you are valued, where your input is taken into consideration. All right. It provides a visual summary of all the various factors supporting and opposing a particular idea. So you always want to weigh, all right, the factors that support this new idea that you are bringing, right, or this solution that you are bringing, compared to the opposing forces or opposing factors. And you always want the supporting factors to outweigh the opposing factors. Informed decisions can be made as forces for and against are critically evaluated. Right. So that's why I said you want always to have your positive factors or forces outweighing the negative or the forces that are against this idea that is being brought forth. Then it enables businesses to strengthen the driving forces and weaken the restraining forces. These are related terms. Driving forces, these are forces for. These are factors supporting an idea. Then restraining forces, these are forces against or opposing factors. All right, so you take note of that. These terms can be used interchangeably. All right, businesses are able to have an idea of the timeline required and the requirements of additional resources. Okay, now let's look at our homework grade 12s. I hope you managed to gain something from the questions that we looked at. All right, you still have an opportunity to revisit this paper from which these questions came and then work through those. And here is your homework. I want to encourage you to make sure that when you get home, you work through these questions. All right, take them very seriously. They are going to assist you. It says you are going to read the scenario below and answer the questions that follow. So you've got a scenario there on Protea Landscaping, that's PL. It says Protea Landscaping wants to invest their surplus profit in corporate social investment, that's CSI projects. The management of PL is keen to develop their employees for the sake of personal growth. They also want to prioritize rural development so that the movement of people to cities is minimized. 3.6.1, you will be expected to state 2 focus areas of corporate social investment applicable to PL in the scenario above. That's for 2 marks. 3.6.2, discuss the impact of CSI on communities. That's corporate social investment. That's for 6 marks. 3.7, recommend ways in which businesses could deal with the following unprofessional business practices. 3.7.1, sexual harassment for 4 marks. Unauthorized use of workplace funds and resources, 4 marks. So make sure you work through these questions, grade 12s, and you will have good practice. All right. I want us now to look at our summary. What is it that we did today? This revision lesson covered section B, questions 3.1 to 3.8, right? We went up to 3.8, taken from the GDE, that's Gauteng Department of Education Business Studies paper 2, June 2024. That's why I said if you are able to get hold of this paper, right, the GDE Business Studies paper 2, June 2024, please get your hands on this paper and go over the questions that we did together in class. All right. The questions that we dealt with focused on subtopics such as management and leadership, investment, securities, opportunities, investment, that's insurance, team performance assessment, and conflict management. And having said that, grade 12, I want to assure you that our next revision lesson will be very, very important. So make sure you don't miss out on our next revision lesson, which will be focusing on section B, question 4, all right, where we are going to be dealing with miscellaneous topics. So we have looked at question 2 of your section B. We have looked at your question 3. We are going to be moving on to question 4, and you want to be part of that revision lesson. Having said that, I want to thank you for being very attentive, grade 12s. I wish you all the best in your examinations by the time you sit for your exams. All the best and thank you.